Selling the deal. That's the effort now on Capitol Hill for U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Alongside President Obama's Energy and Treasury Secretaries, they all spent over 4 hours taking questions on the Iran nuclear deal from skeptical members of Congress who told Kerry that he had been, quote, fleeced and bamboozled. Testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Secretary Kerry framed the high stakes at hand like this.
President Obama has made it crystal clear that we will never accept a nuclear-armed Iran. But the fact is that Iran now has, we all don't like it, but whether we like it or not, Iran has developed experience with a nuclear fuel cycle. They have developed the ability to produce the fissile material for bomb. And we can't bomb that knowledge away.
Now, in one of the more combative encounters, it happened with Senator Marco Rubio. Kerry also said that if the U.S. rejected this deal, the opportunity to negotiate with the U.S. may never come again.
This is a deal whose survival is not guaranteed beyond the term of the current president. This deal is fundamentally and irreparably flawed. I believe it will security, and it makes the world a more dangerous place. And throughout this process, by the way, this administration, in my opinion, has repeatedly capitulated on some important items.
We don't lose anything here. The way we lose is by rejecting the deal. If you think the Ayatollah is going to come back and negotiate again with an American, that's fantasy.
Now, Congress has less than 2 months to review the deal. President Obama has said that he would veto the bill if, in fact, it was approved by Congress, essentially rejecting this Iran deal. Joining me now is NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Luke Russert and former State Department official and president of the Washington Strategy Group, Joel Rubin. Luke, let me start with you and walk us through some of the fault lines in Congress. Is this deal going to get passed? Where do you potentially see any problems on Capitol Hill for the president?
Well, let's start with the second part of that question, Eamon. I think the biggest problems that the president will face will really be this congressional recess, and that's when some of the outside groups that oppose this deal are really going to mobilize. And Nancy Pelosi said to me today that she is expecting tens of millions of dollars to be put into advertisements, to be put into plants at different town halls and rallies against this deal in an effort to try and really rattle some of the Democratic members who support this deal is going to need in order to preserve veto-proof majorities. So I think that's sort of the biggest impediment. That, as well as any more of these sort of outside deals that have sort of come to light, as of right now the administration says are classified. But I will say this, as I've been up here for about 6 years, I've seen a lot of big votes, and Nancy Pelosi told me last week that she's going to actively lobby for this bill. Nancy Pelosi rarely loses a vote with her House Democratic caucus. In fact, I can't even remember the last time she did. So if she's behind it, there's a pretty good chance that they'll be able to preserve that veto-proof majority number. It faces a more difficult path in the Senate, but all you need is one of these chambers to be veto-proof. Okay. I think there's a real amount of pressure, though, Eamon, on Chuck Schumer, the New York senator, and who's in line to become the majority leader. He's someone who's been a little bit coy about where he is on this deal. He's definitely uncomfortable with it. But if he were to give it its support, then there's no way there'd be a veto-proof majority in the Senate, I don't think, at least.
Yeah, you brought up a good point there about Senator Schumer. Here in New York City, thousands of people were protesting yesterday precisely to get his attention about this nuclear deal. You could see some of those pictures. It was a pretty large turnout. But, Joe, let me ask you, in terms of the full court press from the administration, you got the Secretary of State, and you have Ernest Moniz as well as Jack Lew, all of them on the Hill today. Did they do a good job answering the questions and the legitimate concerns of members of Capitol Hill?
Great to be with you, Eamon. They did, and this is a deal that is very good for American national security. This is a deal that's going to block Iran from getting a nuclear bomb, and that's key. The question is, are members of Congress open to listening to this? In my experience at the State Department, that was not always the case, where we would see members come into briefings essentially with a closed mind. This deal, therefore, is going to get through, as Luke said, based on the merits of whether or not Democrats will support it. And I believe they will. They're going to have these open discussions, but they're taking this seriously. The other side right now is really rolling the dice on our national security.
And Luke, you brought up a really good point about the groups that are trying to lobby against this. Two that come to mind, obviously AIPAC. They have deployed about 300 lobbyists on Capitol Hill. They're spending something close to $20 million directly or indirectly through other groups as well to try to lobby Congress. How impactful do you think this lobbying effort is going to be in trying to block this deal? Is it a lost cause from their perspective?
Well, I say that's probably the $20 million question. You know, I've been going through some of these House districts to sort of see which Democratic members may be vulnerable to this onslaught of attacks that are or pressure, I should say, from AIPAC. And here's the thing, is the way the House Democratic Caucus is made up of right now is that most of the moderate people who would be very receptive to this, they all lost. I mean, that's how well the Republicans did in 2014 by just beating back the Ds. So what you have left is essentially a majority progressive caucus, and progressives, even those that are usually hospitable to a group like AIPAC, they sort of view this as a way to avert war. So while they may like Israel and they may completely detest Iran, want nothing to do with Iran, the thought of possibly the next administration or something going to war over Iran because they didn't take this deal, I think they would just assume take this deal and be done with it, and that would play better with their constituencies than perhaps voting against this. So that's what I think is going to be very interesting to see, is the pressure put on those members and whether or not the progressive pushback to avert war overtakes the challenge that AIPAC will present.
Interesting indeed. NBC's Luke Russert, our man on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much for that. Joel, I want you to hang with me just for a second. We're going to continue this discussion, slightly go in a different direction here.